What incredible things happen when you stop settling for a life that looks good on paper and start choosing one that feels alive with the dreams and desires you haven't claimed yet. It's your host, Katie Kay, artist, mentor, entrepreneur, founder of the Creator Code, and mentor for women ready for the best chapter of their life. Are you ready for more? Fuck yes. Let's go, my loves. Hello, friends. It's episode 2. This still continues to feel incredibly exciting. It makes my heart beat a little faster than it should be. So in episode 2, we're going to really unpack what that one small thing is that unlocks everything. But it's actually something that a lot of people ignore. And that thing is aliveness. I'm going to talk about what it means, what aliveness is. I'm going to share lots of examples of giving yourself permission to experience aliveness. I'm going to talk about what it is to me, how I notice it showing up, and what it means to me. I'm also going to share how you create more of this in your life and how I've created more of it in my life and what happens when you do that. Unpacking some of those juicy stories that you might have heard me talk about in the first episode in The Battle Cry. So welcome. It's so good to be finally standing up and sharing these things that are so close to my heart. So what is aliveness? There are so many different ways that we can look at this and unpack it and analyze it. But it really is quite different from person to person. And so in preparation for this, I did a bit of research. I looked at the dictionary. I asked ChatGPT. I considered it from different perspectives. You know, from a conscious perspective, from a layman's perspective. How would different people define this? And how do I really talk about it so it doesn't sound like something kind of ethereal and up in the air and floaty and not tangible? Because I am by nature a very practical human. And although I am spiritual, although I have a lot of interests which are otherworldly, woo, whatever you want to call them, I am very grounded and practical, and I like to understand things. So it's important to unpack this word and not just speak about it like something that everybody gets. Because you do get it, but you just might experience it differently to me or to your sister or anybody else in your life. So here are some of my definitions. Aliveness is when you feel switched on and inside your life. Aliveness is the state of being fully aware, responsive, and engaged with your inner experience and your external world at the same time. Aliveness is the spark in your chest, the ache of wanting, and the gentle intensity of being moved, all at the same time. Aliveness is the free flow of energy through the nervous system that you feel in your body as warmth, tingling, expansion, emotional movement, and sensation. Aliveness is the felt sense of being in contact with your own life force. And to me, what feels the most resonant is that aliveness is the willingness to feel, to want, and to respond to life, as opposed to numbing, forcing, or enduring. It's responding to life from my own truth and desire rather than any shoulds or anything that looks good on paper. Let me know if one of those definitions felt better than the other or others. Let me know if it feels different to you, and if so, what's your definition of aliveness? How do you notice it showing up, and what does it feel like to you? So I want to give a bunch of examples of giving yourself permission to experience aliveness in your life. And these are a big mix of different things. So for example, you're a photographer and you go out on a shoot and you know exactly what you need to do for the client. That's your job and you take it seriously. But you shoot one shot for the client and one shot for you, because in your body you feel aliveness around this particular source of inspiration, the muse, the burst of creativity in you. And so your aliveness comes through in this desire to express yourself, even though at the same time you're actually doing a job. Say it's Saturday morning and you have all these things you need to do, and you also have this desire to just be you, be free, not be weighed down by all the things you need to do. And so you decide to get your necessities done and out of the way early in the day, and then give yourself this lush, spacious afternoon or evening to just enjoy your own time and figure it out as you go. Another example is when you choose to pause and slow down really deliberately to savor or enjoy something and to feel yourself savoring and enjoying something. So it could be a really simple moment like having a sleep in the morning and drinking a coffee in bed. It could be preparing yourself a beautiful meal. It could be hanging out in your backyard and listening to the birds and watching the light change. It could be the way that you go about your beauty routine, and give yourself a little massage or use some special scented oil, really pausing and slowing down and not just going through the motions and noticing yourself enjoying this pausing and slowing down. A really big one is following your intuition and not talking yourself out of it. For example, last year I joined a high-level women's business mastermind with no money to pay for it and no proof of anything that was going to happen or that I was going to get. It was just a feeling that I had that I needed to be in the room. And so I trusted that feeling. And it would have been very easy to have rationalized it and said, no, there's so many reasons why you shouldn't do this right now. And that would not have been following my aliveness. That would have been following the practical parts of life, my budget, the numbers, the dates, what seemed to make sense. But aliveness doesn't always make sense. It doesn't live by a rule book or a schedule or a calendar, and neither does intuition. Any time that you make big and brave choices that you know are going to lead you to big and brave things, like me starting this podcast and making it exactly what I wanted to be because I decided, not because of what it said in a book or on ChatGPT or someone else who's not living my life told me. Anytime you make big and brave choices, no matter what they are, that is following your aliveness and giving yourself permission to experience aliveness in your body and in your life. And those big and brave choices can be so wide-ranging. To one person, maybe starting a podcast is no big deal because maybe they already have a public presence, maybe they've had another podcast. But to me, it's huge. To me, it's a massive thing. To one person, maybe skydiving is a big and brave thing. To another, it's like, yeah, whatevs, I've done that. So what is aliveness to you? Let me know how this lands and if anything different comes up for you and how this feels, hearing these examples of what aliveness is. So let me share a little more about how aliveness feels to me in my life. What makes me feel alive? Because you have to figure this out for yourself. And this is where some of these big choices, these big mores come from. So first up, one of the most important things to me that's been incredibly important in my life in the last few years and will probably continue to be so is travel. Travel makes me feel so alive. I know that I'm meant to be traveling and I'm meant to experience the world through the lens of a traveler. I have had this alive in me since I was quite a young girl. My travel bug started in my late teens, early 20s when I first went on a working holiday visa to the UK and then traveled around Europe. And I thought maybe I could get it out of my system, but it never really left my system. It doesn't mean I've been traveling consistently my whole life. Of course not, because I've denied myself that for a lot of years. I've gone back into forcing and enduring and numbing and restricting my aliveness. But I've stepped back into travel. So last year I went on 5 overseas trips. 3 of them were on my own. And I had a ridiculously good time. One of them was a family holiday with myself, my husband and my youngest son. My oldest son didn't come on that, and that was a little tricky to deal with, but we had the most beautiful, expansive time in Vietnam together. And I just absolutely loved it. I loved the feeling of freedom, the exploration of being in a country that I didn't know, so many things. I went on a trip to Costa Rica to a women's retreat called the Untamed Woman. I'd never been to Costa Rica before, and that was an incredible
incredible experience for me, being in a different country where I don't speak the language and experiencing something different. I seek these things. I'm looking for experiences around the world that I can go and feel expanded and experience transformation and something new. The year before last, I also had 5 overseas trips, and I expect I will have at least that, maybe more this year. And so why did I invite travel back into my life? It happened just over 2 years ago when I had a period of no travel, mostly due to the pandemic. And it felt to me like I needed to go for the first time and have a trip by myself. It just felt like something I needed to do. And every time I thought about it, I had this feeling in my chest that was like butterflies and excitement, and that's aliveness. Like, that felt like, fuck yes, this call. And so I eventually did get that trip, and that was late that year, late in 2023, when I went overseas by myself for the first time after many trips with other people. And I went to a kindred retreat in Malibu in California, and that really kick-started this new paradigm in my life where travel is a big fuck yes that I take at every opportunity. And I had no idea how I would pay for all this travel. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an unlimited travel budget, but I made it a priority because I named it and I said yes to it, and I sought it out and I kept saying yes, and now it's just here and it's possible. Another really big one for me is space, having space. I don't think we prioritise space very much in the modern world. We are obsessed with being busy. We're obsessed with filling our schedules. We don't prioritise things like just lying on the floor for no reason. And because of that, we don't really prioritise creative play. We don't really prioritise just giving ourselves permission to do nothing and to see what emerges from that. And it's why we don't prioritise creation, that we instead prioritise consumption. So I love space. When I have space and choice and freedom, I become my most juicy creative self. I want to create a life where that's built in, because that allows me to feel more alive more often. And it's challenging because the system doesn't really invite that. You know, the workforce that most of us are in that says 5 days a week, 9 to 5, doesn't really allow a lot of space. Even working for myself, the change that I've had in my own working life from this time last year compared to right now is huge, because I've made choices to allow for space and to prioritise space as a way of prioritising my own aliveness. I used to be chained to the computer for huge long periods of time, and yes, it is a fact that my work is very much at a computer, and we're not at a stage in life just yet where I can go for a walk and type at the same time, or like write something. So I am going to be sitting at the computer for periods of time. But this time last year felt like I had no choice in that, and I had no space in that. There was no space to choose what I did on any given day. It was scheduled within an inch of its life. That gave me no aliveness. And it's not like that anymore, and that feels incredible. Another big part of aliveness for me is play and fun. And I do think this is relevant to every single human in the world, because we don't actually have enough of it as adults. Sometimes our play and fun is actually numbing. I find alcohol is responsible for some of that, because we have fun and we play with friends and we socialise, and often alcohol is involved, and that actually takes us a little away from our aliveness, or it can at least. Our aliveness can become numbed and altered by that. Prioritising play and fun first, instead of prioritising all of the stuff and then seeing what's left, which is what so many people do. They prioritise work and responsibilities and obligations first, and then what's left? Not much. And so play and fun don't get prioritised. So when I plan my time, my week, my month, my year, I always put the personal stuff in first. I have done that for years, but more now I actually acknowledge that I want this. I want play and fun. How many playful, fun experiences and events can I build in so that I can feel that more? As children, that's what life's all about. And why should we lose that as we grow up? That's where aliveness is often found, in these moments of delight and wonder and joy. You know, jumping on a trampoline, running through the grass, lazing about in the water, gazing at the stars, watching a sunset, laughing with friends over nothing. Another one is allowing myself to be excited about stuff. Aliveness feels very much like that to me. Feeling this rush of fuck yes, giddiness, butterflies, and following what matters right now. Whether it's my work, this podcast, the creative flow that you might be in, learning about things that I love, allowing myself to be excited. Feels like I'm saying yes to my aliveness, and I love that. Another one is intuition and magic. I'm so into this. I'm so into allowing myself to trust that and to pay attention to it, to feel into interesting coincidences, into numbers, into the way that messages show up. Tuning into that and following it and noticing what happens. So then you follow it more, feeling the universe respond to the things that you want and you create and you put out there and the truths that you find yourself in, and then feeling yourself grow and change from that and become more. That feels amazing to me, and I will always believe in magic. Living your purpose. The more you can live your purpose, the more aliveness you feel in the everyday, because it's where everything aligns, and it's where your body and your mind and your heart are all in coherence with each other. When you're following your superpowers and your genius, which everyone has superpowers and genius to lead you to a bigger purpose. That feels so alive to me. Aliveness is just listening to what's inside me. It's trusting it. It's following it. Aliveness is my compass. How do you get more of this in your life? Firstly, you have to figure out what it is that you want. What is the aliveness for you and what feels like the best path to follow for you? And it might just start with these little pings that you might need to start listening to and tuning into and paying attention to. A really big thing is, though, that you have to admit that you want it. And that can be hard. I spent a long time not admitting what I wanted, but instead doing what should be done and ignoring the things that I wanted. It often requires leaning into discomfort, and that's because sometimes following aliveness can be a harder path for whatever reason. You might have to break something, you might have to start something new, you might have to admit something, you might have to change something. And that feeling of discomfort usually is around change and what will happen, and will I be judged, and is this even possible? And so discomfort becomes part of it. And I have to say that I actually enjoy feeling uncomfortable these days, because it represents something to me that's important, and that's growth and change and aliveness. And I'm very used to feeling uncomfortable. But it takes some practice, because often we're told that if something doesn't feel right, we shouldn't do it. But there are different ways of tuning into that and what not feeling right actually is coming from and what it actually means. I want to share this one little story that is a perfect example of this. When I returned to the Kindred community, which is a community that held me dearly for many years, and during the pandemic I lost some contact with that community and I didn't get to go to events anymore because of the pandemic. So when I tuned back in and found myself back in that community in late 2023, which is when I started traveling again and when a lot of things changed for me, I went to this first retreat, and at the retreat I found out about the next retreat, and the next retreat was going to be held in Portugal, in Sintra, in about 6 months' time. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, I don't know if the timing is very good for that. And so it was hard for me to commit to it. And I had an idea in my mind too that I really had to ask permission, especially from my husband, to go to that. And when I got home from the retreat, I spoke to him about it. And I said I was really considering going and I would love to go and I'd wanted his blessing. And he, of course, was amazingly supportive and gave me his blessing to go. And then very quickly after that, I found out that there was another retreat in between those two, and it was to be in Mexico. And I was like, fuck, I want to go to that too. And then I had this feeling of like, that's too much. I can't. Who am I to think I can go to 2 retreats straight after this one by myself? That's crazy. But the aliveness that I felt when I imagined being at these retreats was undeniable. I couldn't shake it. And I was like, fuck me dead, I'm going to have to talk to my husband about this one too. And I had this really awkward conversation where I was beating around the bush because I didn't know how to bring it up, and I just thought, this is going to sound ludicrous. By the way, babe, I know I just went to Malibu, but I want to go to Mexico and it's in like 6 weeks, and then 3 months after that I'm going to Portugal. But I followed this feeling and I had that awkward conversation and I went, and it was life-changing and such a great example of following my aliveness. The challenge of all of this that can come when you realize that there's misalignment between what you want and how you're living, that's not easy. And I'm going to be sharing lots of aspects of that in this podcast. That is part of the whole point. So I had a lot of sorting out to do in this process of what my new mission was and how I was going to clarify it, how I was going to live it. My journey in this period has been really tumultuous, like a roller coaster. And there's been expansion and contraction and expansion and contraction. And, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back continuously. I really want to share a lot of that because I think it's the part that people don't talk about. You see people grow and expand and follow their hearts and pivot and make new choices. And it always seems like they just had this one thing happen and suddenly this new pathway opened and they just walked through the door. I'm here to say, no, it's actually not quite that simple, but there are some simple aspects of it. And one of them is aliveness and really tuning into that and starting there. So what happens when we turn towards the thing that we want the most? When we tune in to our aliveness and we start chasing it, literally anything and everything happens. So you've got to be ready for more, because more is coming. More is coming. And the things that we are tuning into and paying attention to and wanting are more. They are more of some of the things that we might have already experienced. My desire for travel wasn't this new thing that I'd never felt before. Actually, it had been in me all along. And that's why I call it more, because I had that desire as a young child. I used to obsess about France. I wanted to go live in France. I studied French at school. I was obsessed with it. Often these things are in us all along, and it's just us asking for them and more of them. A really big part of what's come through for me is creative flow and expansion from that place. My creativity right now is electric. I've never experienced it like this. And I've been a creative human my whole life, and I've identified with that my whole life since I was born. But this is next level, absolutely. And I've shared some of the juicy highlights already in episode 1, but I'm planning on expanding on that a lot more. Episode 3 will actually be all about what happened when I realised that I didn't in fact have it all, and that the life that I built wasn't the one I wanted anymore. That's a really big part of what happens when we turn towards the thing we want the most. What happens is we get more of everything. We get more life and more living and more us. More of us comes through, more of our authentic self, how we feel, what we think, what we want, our vision, our genius comes through. I'm going to wrap it up in a moment. If something in this episode stirred you, if you have been sensing a pattern in your life and this all resonated and you can't quite name what it is, but you're like, yep, I feel this. If you actually don't want to reinvent yourself, but instead you want clarity without throwing it away or collapsing, I'd like to invite you into a free 45-minute class. It'll answer some of the questions that might have come up while you listened to this episode or any of my episodes, and it will orient you towards your own lived experience, not mine, and you will immediately feel and know why that matters. It also includes the best somatic practice that I've ever had the privilege of doing, learning, practicing, and that's kindred meditation, which is a somatic practice that you do with your body, which has deeply changed my life. It also introduces the concept, the philosophy framework, the creator code, which is a very important body of work that I'm currently developing. You'll find that in the show notes. And I'd like to leave you with a question this week to ponder as you move through your week. And that is, what makes you feel the most alive? And what would it mean to your life to start prioritizing that feeling of aliveness? Thanks for listening. Please contact me personally or leave a comment. I would love to hear from you with questions, responses, how it made you feel, anything at all. See you next time.